Raider Nation, the picks are in. Eddie Paskal joined here virtually by two of our favorite guys, Marcel Reece and Lincoln Kennedy, to break down night one of the 2020 NFL draft. And gentlemen, it was an interesting night. It was an exciting night for the silver and black. So Marcel, I'm going to start with you. At 12 overall, and we'll just go in order. That seems to make sense. The Raiders select Henry Ruggs III. They had their option of all three wide receivers, the alleged big three of wideouts at number 12 overall. You've had a little time to marinate on it. What do you like about Ruggs?
Well, first of all, Eddie, Big Link, it's good to see both of you guys. And I don't know if you could tell, Link, but right now I got my Al shirt on, so you know it's like game day attire. But listen, Henry Ruggs III is flat out speed, something that you cannot teach. The late, great Al Davis. Pops is looking down and he's smiling. He is happy. Mark Davis is happy. John Gruden has a new toy. We are in business. Listen, when you looked at all these three receivers, these top three receivers, Henry Ruggs III is the quintessential Raider. He can do everything. He's hard-nosed. He's tough. He can block, and he is fast. Flat out fast. It's undeniable, and I love the pick.
You know, Lincoln, and we talked so much last year, you and I, about what speed can do for an offense and what a guy like Henry Ruggs III can mean for the entire offense as a whole. So I'm curious, what is he going to do, Lincoln, for that wide receiver room? But what is he going to do for this offense? And I'm looking at Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, guys like that. What is he going to do for this offense in 2020?
Well, I want you to imagine the defensive secondary like the grid. And you got no three grids. You have deep, you have intermediate, and you have short. You think about a player like Hunter Renfrow last year, what he was able to do with the short game, short passing game. And then Darren Waller on the intermediate level. Now that you have a speed-burning receiver that can stretch that long part of the field and take it deep, it's going to take the top off of the defense. So what I mean by that, it's going to disrupt safety play. You're not going to be able to key down as much as you want on Waller for fear of that deep threat. There are a lot of teams in this league that have it, most notably one in our division, Kansas City. What they're able to do with Tyreek Hill, that's what it brings to the table. And just like Reece said, it's a little bit of a throwback draft because, as Reece mentioned, the late great Al Davis said, you can't teach speed. Speed definitely kills.
Absolutely, Lincoln. He's not just fast. This guy can run every route in the route tree. He's going to be used on fly sweeps, reverses, everything under the sun. John is going to be extremely creative in the way he uses Henry Ruggs and where he places them in alignment. It's going to be fun to watch this season.
You know, and Marcel, I'm glad you brought up his kind of versatility, because when we were looking at him over the past 12 hours, he's a guy that, as you said, you can put him anywhere on that offense, but he's a guy who's also going to contribute day one on special teams. He's going to be an incredible gunner if that's what Rich Bisaccia wants him to be. He's going to be able to help out as a kick returner, as a punt returner. He is one of those kind of rare, quote unquote, wide receiver ones who's going to be an immediate impact in special teams as well.
I can tell you right now, Rich is definitely going to want him to be a gunner, but John Gruden is not going for his number one receiver being a gunner right now. But it is something to look at because Henry Ruggs does love to return the football, and you have to love that fire, but that just speaks to his competitive side. And just like last year's draft, John Gruden and Mike Mayock aren't just going for who's the best athletes. They're also looking at character. Who's going to be the best teammate? Who's going to fit in our locker room and in our community? And Henry Ruggs III is one of those guys who has a great family, tough mom, tough dad, a really good group around him, and he is just going to be a great teammate for our entire locker room.
And because, Marcel, you told me last night, and this stayed with me, that it's not about building the best 53. It's about building the right 53. And it certainly seems like young Mr. Ruggs is going to fit in an incredible way right there. So we talked about number 12, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Henry a lot more in the coming days. And let's be honest, he's an exciting player, and we should be talking about him. The draft is all about excitement and hope and what the next year is going to bring. So they handle him at number 12. They fill an immediate need at wide receiver. And a couple picks down the board, at number 19, Mike Mayock and John Gruden pull the trigger on Damon Arnett, a cornerback from Ohio State. And what really intrigues me about him, gentlemen, and Lincoln, I'll start with you. He's a guy that decided to come back for his senior year. He had the chance to come out early, but he said, you know what? I'm not done with how I want to develop and who I want to be when I get to that next level. So he comes back for one more season. He's playing with Jeff Okudah on the outside, but he's a guy who's got a lot of football under his belt. So what do you like about him at 19, Lincoln?
Well, one of the, like Reece said, and it brings back fond memories of the history of the Raiders. It's a throwback. It's a throwback pick to me. It's a handsy versatile corner like a like a Lester Hayes or Willie Brown or some of the great cornerbacks that we've had. And more importantly, he's a press corner, and that's not easy to teach, especially on the college level. He's a press corner that has good ball awareness. Now, there's some things he obviously has to work on, but great value for a draft in the future. And now they've got their cornerbacks other future tape.
Lincoln, we were talking right before we came on the air about the transition from defensive backs to the NFL in particular. And you were telling me that guys out of Ohio State, just the way that they're coached up, the way that they are run schematically, it makes them prepared to make that step and make that jump maybe a little bit quicker than other guys.
Absolutely. What you can't teach overnight, I should say, is ball awareness. Guys that know when to turn around and find the ball or look for the ball is something that a premium emphasis that coaches in the National Football League love. I've always heard defensive back coaches, find the ball, find the ball, find the ball. And that's in this case, you've got another corner who can find the ball, and he's aggressive at it.
Marcel, you look at this move now, and you're looking at the outside of this Raiders secondary. On each side, you can pair him with Trayvon Moen, who had a really, really nice rookie season. How excited should Trayvon be that now he's got a guy who's going to play on the other side of him, and they're really going to have a chance, if all things go to plan, to grow and get better together?
Not just Trayvon, but this entire defense should be excited about the addition of Damon. You cannot have a substitution for someone who is a natural corner. He's a natural corner. He is not being plugged in to play cornerback. This is where he plays. He does have some versatility for this defense, but you can also put him on the island, and he is going to be extremely comfortable. One thing that I look at in evaluating a lot of these positions when they're coming from college to the pros is it's not just the stats, but you look at traits. What are the traits that transition into our professional NFL in our league? They're going against grown men, and this kid is tough. He played an entire season with a cast on his hand from a broken wrist. He never backed down from anything, and he was playing opposite of a top 5 pick. So he did not lack attention. He did not lack targets against him. And throughout his college career, he never gave up more than 1 touchdown in a season. That speaks a lot to a guy who played in a winning program, which is an understatement for Ohio State.
And Marcel, how valuable is it too that he comes into the NFL and part of his repertoire, part of what he is known to be good at, is getting in the run game, being a physical cornerback. That is hard to find in some of these young DBs coming out these days.
And Eddie and Lincoln, that's one of those traits that I look for. How physical can you be? Because this is a physical game, and you need your corners and your defensive backs to not shy away from tackling guys, not shy away from coming up the field and hitting. That's what being a Raider is all about when it comes to defense. You look at the historic defensive backfield of the Raiders franchise, and like Link mentioned earlier, you're talking about Lester Hayes, Mike Haynes, and Willie Brown. You're talking about Hall of Famers, guys who were transcendent in the game, and it's a big deal. And I think he's going to be a great addition for a long time in this organization.
Lincoln, you look at these 2 picks now kind of in their totality with 3 more coming this evening. But one of the constant themes that we've really talked about the past, call it 12 to 18 hours, is competition, right? And when you look at Henry Ruggs III, when you look at Damon, one of the first things that has come out of John Gruden and Mike Mayock, I should say just Mike Mayock since he's the only one that spoke last night, but one of the first things that he said is these guys are ultra competitors. And we heard Damon on the conference call last night, and he said, listen, I've been the underdog my entire career. People are saying to me, hey, I'm surprised that, or, people have said, oh, we're surprised that you went in the first round. He goes, I'm not. He goes, I look at myself as one of the best cornerbacks in this draft. And he is certainly not lacking confidence. Neither is Henry Ruggs III. And at the end of the day, Lincoln, regardless of the names on the back of those jerseys, the silver and black filled 2 glaring needs on night 1 of the NFL draft.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Marcel hinted on it earlier, talking about character. I think this is another one of those gritty character guys that you want in your locker room. And ever since Gruden's taken over this team, he's restructured this entire roster. Got rid of a lot of guys that were here before him, and has really overturned this roster. And since then, guys, he's been drafting for a need. Him and Mayock, they've been drafting for a need, addressing needs. They had a good core, and now they've expanded on. They've added young, talented depth that should be good for years to come.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly the plan. So, gentlemen, 3 picks this evening on a Friday night. We're at 80, 81, and 91. And people get so caught up in that first night of the draft. And listen, I'm guilty of it too, man. It is exciting. The picks are flying in, and you're like I said, optimism springs eternal. But this is a 3-day marathon, and you can get some incredibly good pieces on night 2 of the draft. Let's look at Trayvon Moen just a year ago. So, Marcel, I'll begin with you. When you look at these 3 picks this evening, where do you think the Raiders go? What needs would you like to see filled tonight?
I'll tell you, this marathon, Eddie, this marathon started a long time ago for especially for Mike Mayock. But today and tomorrow, this is his sweet spot, man. This is where his bread is buttered. Mike Mayock does a phenomenal job all year long, just watching a ton of film. And he's been watching film on these guys, if you think back, for years already. So he has a good thought in his mind of his top guys that he wants to go with. I think right now, with as aggressive as John Gruden and Mike Mayock were in free agency, and filling 2 huge needs on our roster in the first round of the draft yesterday, I think right now, I don't think he can miss. I know we have some openings right now where he's going to just look at it and get the best value for those picks and add a ton of depth to our team.
You know, I'm glad you brought up that term, Marcel, depth, because when I look at this team and where we're sitting at now, and we are far from a finished product. I think Mike and John will be the first people to tell you that, but there is not that kind of glaring need after what's been handled, as you said, in free agency and in night 1 of the draft. But Lincoln, at this point, is it just about getting the best guys that are on the board, fostering that we like with the competition that we talked about just a minute ago? Is it about just finding good guys that you can plug in and push the other guys that are currently on this roster?
Well, yeah, it's always about that. And whether you do that through the draft or free agency, what you're doing is you're trying to add depth to your roster. I think in this situation, you have to take all the things in consideration. One, we don't know how the second round is going to go. And the Raiders right now don't have a second round pick. So seeing their way through that, they can still draft another receiver to add more depth to the position. We know that P.J. Hall has been put on notice as defensive tackle, so they might even go defensive side. I wouldn't be surprised if they go somewhere in the secondary. There weren't a lot of safeties that were taken off the board yet. And you could possibly go make it there to add to what you have in your secondary to create a young umbrella, if you will. And even linebacker depth. Depth is absolutely critical because we saw through a battle of attrition last year, especially at the last game against the Denver Broncos, that Gruden said I couldn't go for it and take my chances in overtime because I was out of linebackers. So even though they addressed the need for starting linebackers, adding depth to that position might be wise as well.
To Lincoln's point, if we're talking about specific positions, I do think that we will add more depth at linebacker because when you're talking about a 53-man roster, it's not just about having 3 linebackers or even 4 linebackers. It's more so about having, that linebacker body type and position to be able to use them on special teams, plug them in at all the 3 different linebacker positions on your defense, and also DB. Safety mostly, just like Lincoln hinted to earlier, you just can't have enough depth at the position.
Absolutely. And Lincoln, I know this will be music to your ears. I love investing in those big boys up front. So I wouldn't even mind seeing another interior lineman, maybe another tackle for depth, because like you guys said, it really is all about depth. So Marcel, I'll ask you this, to look into your crystal ball. We have 3 third-round picks. Do you foresee a world where the Raiders perhaps can package some of those and get into the second round, get into that, like you said, that Mike Mayock sweet spot?
I think Mike also, exceeds expectations and does a phenomenal job in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, and especially undrafted free agents. So I don't think you necessarily have to give up something to move up into that second round unless you absolutely see a player that you have to have and you're going to miss out on them. And I'm not sure that individual player is there.
Lincoln, I'll ask you the same thing. Do you foresee a world where the Silver and Black maybe move up, or do you think they stand pat with those 3 third-round picks?
Value. There's something to be said about getting a guy in the 3rd round who's completely hungry and wants to show why he should have been a second round or possibly a first-round pick. Depending on how this second round goes, like Reece said, if there's not a guy who's on your draft board who's just that you think can add instant starter or instant impact to your team, You don't need to move up. You've got 3 solid third-round picks. You can use those to your advantage and bring some hungry guys in your locker room that will compete for starting jobs.
With having 2 back-to-back third-round picks, I believe it's 80 and 81, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. You could see a situation where you possibly move down from one of those and create yourself an opportunity to get picks in the 4th round and maybe 6th and 7th round as well.
At this point, I want Mike Mayock on John Gruden to have as many picks as humanly possible, because look what they did a year ago. They feasted from the 1st round all the way through the ranks of the undrafted free agents, and it was a good time to be a Raider. Still is. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Let's enjoy the second night of the 2020 NFL Draft, and I have a feeling we're going to do this again very, very soon. This has been brought to you by Twitch, the official live streaming service of the Las Vegas Raiders.